Welcome back to Research in Daily Life. Now we are in the last video for the series of videos in the research process. Now let's have a quick review again. The research process starts with searching for the problem and then choosing the proper research design and methodology, formulating your theory and hypotheses, sampling and data collection, data presentation, interpretation, and analysis, and finally, formulating conclusions and recommendations. Now, finally, we are on step 6. That's formulating conclusions and recommendations. After all the data collection and after understanding the data that we gathered, now it is time to formulate the conclusion and recommendation. The ultimate task of a research is for you to come up with the answer to the question, and that is by forming your conclusion from the data that you gathered. Now, conclusion must answer the research question or questions formulated by the researcher. However, if the researcher fails to come up with an answer to the question, or if the answer that came out from the research was not satisfying enough, then the researcher must continue the study to find the answer or to find better answers to that question or to the research questions. And this is where recommendations will come in. Recommendations are statements made by the researcher for the beneficiaries of the study. There are several reasons why a researcher makes recommendations. And some of these are, first, the usefulness of the research. Second, the improvement of the research. And finally, exploring different aspects. Now, since recommendations are usually made for beneficiaries or the stakeholders of the research, these recommendations are made so that the research can be useful for them. For example, the researcher can recommend using the study for the improvement of a certain policy. Thus, the research will have its practical uses for the betterment of the society. Or if you could, just like the example in the previous video, if a researcher made a study on how to conduct online classes in a better way, then he can make recommendations for the teachers or for educators to use his study so that they can improve the conduct of their classes. Now, the second one, which is the improvement of research, the researcher can also make recommendations for future researchers to improve his study. Remember, a research has its limitations as well, and of course there's scope. Now, a researcher can propose that other researchers make further study by expanding the horizon. So, say for example, the respondents of the researchers to just cover a certain province, then he can make recommendations to have more respondents from bigger areas. Or probably the other researchers can overcome the constraints of the previous researchers. So these can be seen or can be presented in the recommendations. And finally, we have exploring different aspects. Due to the constraints and limitation of a study, we try to focus on a certain aspect. And in the recommendation, you can suggest that other researchers focus also on the other aspects which were not covered by your study. This final part of the research ensures that it answers a certain question, or the task of finding the answer to the question is given to other researchers. Then it makes the research enterprise continue, and it doesn't stop. It's just like what was mentioned in the first video, like human mind has always been curious. We always continue to find answers to questions, and research will continue because of this, because there could be more questions that would arise after a research finishes. So it is important that we do research appropriately so that we can contribute to our society and our world. Now, doing research appropriately would relate it to another topic, and that is research ethics. And that will be discussed in our next video.